Over the past 6 years, I've put together highlights of what have been found or talked about over the previous year. But first, my process. The first step is to clip out news articles and copy stories from the various websites during the year. Then in November and December, the process moves to sifting through them to identify what is interesting. There are usually around 50 stories, which are reduced to 7, plus the newly installed World Heritage sites. I endeavor to find and reference at least 2 sources for each topic that is presented. Please bear with me as I struggle to pronounce some of these names. The sources. While compiling the information for this presentation, a variety of sources were used. Some of them include Archaeology magazine, which is the official publication of the Archaeological Institute of America, Current World Archaeology, which is a fantastic monthly British publication, and British Archaeology magazine, which is the official magazine of the Council for British Archaeology. Also, BBC History is another monthly British publication with a heavy slant towards British history, and is also a guide to what is being broadcast on the BBC networks, as well as what is being exhibited in museums of the world. Other sources included the UNESCO World Site, the newspapers and websites of The Guardian, the Daily Mail, the Washington Post, Reuters, and the Telegraph. The websites of CNN, CBS News, BBC World News, as well as Wikipedia, National Geographic, and Ancient Origins. On each slide, I also mentioned additional sources for that particular subject. Let's start with the UNESCO World Heritage Sites for 2019. The UNESCO World Heritage List now includes 1,121 properties forming part of the cultural and natural heritage that the World Heritage Committee has considered to have outstanding universal value. Their website has the complete list with descriptions of each site, why and when they were selected. The list will help you keep track of the sites you visit in your travels. The list includes some truly amazing places. In 2019, the committee added 29 new sites to the list. We're going to talk about 9 of them. First of my word challenges. The archaeological ruins of Lingqiu City in China. Located in the Yangtze River Basin on the southeastern coast of China are the 5,300-year-old archaeological ruins of Lingqiu, which date from around 3,300 BCE. They reveal an early regional state based on rice cultivation and unified belief system from the late Neolithic China. The ruins are an outstanding example of an early urban civilization. The site is surrounded by an earthen wall and includes other earthen monuments. The bottom of the city wall is made of paving stones as the foundation, with a width of 130 to 200 feet. In some sections of the site, the remains of a 13-foot-high wall are still visible. The site shows extensive urban planning. The unique water conservation system has a total of 6 water gates. There are also indications of a social hierarchy expressed in differentiated burials in the cemeteries. The Lingqiu culture was the last Neolithic jade culture in the Yangtze River Delta of China. The culture was highly stratified, as jade, silk, ivory, and lacquer artifacts were found exclusively in the elite burials, while pottery was more commonly found in the burial plots of poorer individuals. This division of class indicates that the Lingqiu period was an early state symbolized by the clear distinction between social classes. A total of more than 10,000 unearthed relics include jade, pot, and stonewares, also lacquer, bamboo, and bonewares have been uncovered. The 7,000 pieces of the jade wares are mainly used as funerary objects excavated in the elite's graves. The objects include jade bracelets, jade spinning wheels, etc., as well as circular carved birds, turtles, fish, dragonflies, and other animal-shaped ornaments. The site was discovered and initially excavated by Shi Jingjing in 1936. It's hard to believe that it took till 2019 for this site to be included. The ancient city of Babylon in Iraq, situated 53 miles south of Baghdad in the modern-day Iraq, is the ruins of the ancient city of Babylon. The city sits on the banks of the Euphrates River and is divided in equal parts along its left and right banks, with steep embankments to contain the river's seasonal floods. Babylon was originally a small Akkadian town dating from the period of the Akkadian Empire, 2300 BCE. The site includes villages and agricultural areas. Its remains include outer and inner city walls, gates, palaces, temples. There are unique testimony to one of the most influential empires of the ancient world. It was the seat of successive empires under rulers such as Hammurabi and Nebuchadnezzar. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon were one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, although a number of the scholars believe these were actually in the Assyrian capital of Nineveh. It has been estimated that Babylon was the largest city in the world between 1770 and 1670 BCE, and then again in 612 to 320 BCE. It was perhaps the first city to reach a population above 200,000. Bagan, Myanmar. Bagan is an ancient city located in the Mandalay region of Myanmar, lying on a bend of the Irrawaddy River in the central plain of Myanmar. Bagan is a sacred landscape featuring an exceptional range of Buddhist art and architecture. The site includes numerous temples, stupas, monasteries, and places of pilgrimage, as well as archaeological ruins, frescoes, and sculptures. From the 9th to the 13th century CE, the city was the capital of the Pagan kingdom, the first kingdom that unified the regions that would later constitute modern Myanmar. During the kingdom's height, between the 11th and 13th centuries, 4,446 Buddhist temples, pagodas, and monasteries were constructed on the Bagan Plains alone, of which the remains of 3,000 still survive to the present day. The Pagan Empire collapsed in 1287 due to repeated Mongol invasions. The city, once home to some 50,000 people, had been reduced to a small town, never to regain its preeminence. Bagan stands out for not only the sheer number of religious edifices, but also the magnificent architecture of the buildings and their contribution to the Burmese temple design. The artistry of the architecture of pagodas in Bagan proves the achievement of Myanmar craftsmen. This ensemble of monumental architecture reflects the strength and religious devotion of an early Buddhist empire. That's awesome. Churches of the Skav School of Architecture, Russia. This World Heritage Site includes the 10 churches and temples located in the historic city of Pskov on the banks of the Velikaya River in northwest of Russia. These unique buildings produced by the Pskov School of Architecture includes churches and cathedrals, which are integrated into the natural environment through gardens, perimeter walls, and fences dating back to the 12th century. Inspired by the Byzantine and Novgorod traditions, the Pskov school of architecture reached its peak in the 15th and 16th centuries and was one of the foremost schools in the country. It influenced the evolution of Russian architecture over 5 centuries. Pskov is one of the oldest cities in Russia, located about 12 miles east from the Estonian border. Pskov still preserves much of its medieval walls, built in the 13th century. Its medieval citadel is called the Krum and houses within the walls the 256-foot tall Trinity Cathedral, founded in 1138. Other ancient cathedrals adorn the city, including the Machowski Monastery, built in 1152, and famous for its 12th century frescoes, St. John's, built in 1243, and, this is a good word, Snutgorsky Monastery, built in 1310. That looks really cool.
It's the one on the top, that's a monastery? On the left, top left?
This one is the main cathedral.
Oh,
I don't know which one is the monastery.
is it on the corner that should be on the right side? Top.
Beautiful place. Erzbergi Krishnohori mining region, Chechnya and Germany. Erzbergi Krishnohori is also known as the Ore Mountains and span a region in southeastern Germany and northwestern Chechnya, which contains a wealth of several metals exploited through mining from the Middle Ages onwards. The region became the most important source of silver ore in Europe from 1460 to 1560, and was the trigger for technological innovations. Tin was historically the second metal to be extracted and processed at the site. At the end of the 19th century, the region became the major global producer of uranium. The cultural landscape of the Ore Mountains has been deeply shaped by 800 years of almost continuous mining from the 12th to the 20th centuries. The Ore Mountains is a rectangular area, 59 miles long and 28 miles wide. The district created mining towns together with water management systems, factories, training academies, and other institutions. The landscape houses 22 sites related to the different types of metal ores extracted over time, including silver, tin, iron, cobalt blue dyes, uranium, and others. Historically, the first mining was initiated by the Cistercian monasteries. On the German side, the city of Freiberg developed by the late 12th century, while Krupka is mentioned in the 13th century. The discovery of silver deposits in Schneeberg stimulated the foundation of more than 50 villages and towns, which are not only attracted miners and craftsmen, but also turned the region into an important cultural center. Between the 17th and 18th centuries, the mining stagnated due to religious wars between the Catholics and the Protestants. The region was revitalized with the extraction of cobalt dye to support the growing porcelain industry at Messiaen. And I believe you can go now down into some of these tunnels. This is interesting. There's a human being standing there. That is a huge crevice. Water management systems, because you have to get rid of the water that seeps into the mines. You have to bring it up to the surface. The historic center of Sheki with the Khan's Palace, Azerbaijan. The historic city of Sheki is located at the foot of the Greater Caucasus Mountains and divided in two by the Gurjana River. It is located along important historic trade routes. While the older northern part is built on the mountain, its southern part extends into the river valley. Its historic center, rebuilt after the destruction of an earlier town, by mud flows in the 18th century, is characterized by the traditional architectural ensemble of houses with high gabled roofs. The Khan Palace in the northeast of the city and a number of merchant houses reflect the wealth generated by silkworm breeding and the trade in silk cocoons from the late 18th and the 19th centuries. The Khan Palace was built in 1797 by Muhammad Hassan Khan and restored between 1952 and 1967. It was one of the fascinating buildings of medieval Azerbaijan. Though it is called a palace, in fact, it was a summer residence of the Shaki Khanate. The palace was part of a larger administrative complex located within the Shaki fortress. Along with the palace, once there were other magnificent structures, such as Winter Palace, the residential buildings for the Khan's family and servants, as well as an army barracks in the complex. Unfortunately, through time, most of the buildings have been demolished. Now, along with the pool and 100-year-old trees, the palace is the only remaining structure from the complex. The palace is renowned for its lavish decoration of its exterior and interior. Larger portions of the building's facade, including the entire southern elevation of the central halls, on both floors, are covered by a mosaic of colored glass set in wooden latticework that was assembled without nails or glue. Morgana's hoods crowning the four portals are highlighted with gold on the lower level and covered with mirror fragments on the first floor. Remaining surfaces are all facades. On all facades are decorated with floral, tile panels, and tile mosaics. The interior walls of the residence is covered entirely with frescoes, painted at different times during the 18th century. Many of the frescoes feature flowers and vases, while a series of paintings on the first floor halls depict hunting and battle scenes. Beautiful place. Jodrell Bank Observatory in the UK. The observatory is located with other smaller radio telescopes at Jodrell Bank, about 20 miles south of Manchester in the county of Cheshire, England. This rural area is ideal because it's free from radio interference. Jodrell Bank is one of the world's leading radio astronomy observatories. At the beginning of its use in 1945, the property housed research on cosmic rays detected by radar echoes. This observatory, which is still in operation, includes several radio telescopes and working buildings, including engineering sheds and control building. It has had a substantial scientific impact in fields such as the study of meteors and the moon, the discovery of quasars, quantum optics, and the tracking of spacecraft. Immediately after World War II, the British astronomer Alfred Charles Bernard Lovell, working at the University of Manchester's botanical site at Jodrell Bank, with war surplus radar equipment, began research in radio and radar astronomy. Construction of the telescope began in 1952. Operation began shortly before the launching on October of 1957 by the Soviet Union of the first artificial satellite, Sputnik 1. And the satellite's carrier rocket was tracked by the Jodrell Bank by radar. Most of the operational time at Jodrell Bank is devoted to astronomy rather than to tracking and communication. But the telescope has been part of the tracking network of the United States program of space exploration and has monitored most of the Soviet accomplishments. The Jodrell Bank telescope transmitted the first photographs from the surface of the moon, received in February of 1966, by the Soviet Lunar 9 probe. The main telescope at the observatory is the Lovell telescope, which is the third largest steerable radio telescope in the world. This is the first shot. This is the Luna 9. And Sputnik. Mozu Furonichi Kofun Group, mounded tombs of ancient Japan. Located on a plateau above the Osaka Plain, this property includes 123 burial mounds of various sizes. They are called kofun, which is old mounds in Japanese, and can take the shape of keyholes, scallops, squares, or circles. 31 of the burial mounds are keyhole shaped, 30 are round, 48 are rectangular, and a further 14 are of indeterminate shape. These tombs were for members of the elite, containing a range of funerary objects such as weapons, armor, and ornaments. They were decorated with clay figures of cylinders or representations of houses, tools, weapons, and human silhouettes. The above group of kofuns has been selected from a total of 160,000 in Japan and form the richest material representation of the Kofun period from the 3rd to the 6th century. The Daisen Kofun mound, which is pictured here, is the largest at approximately 1,600 feet long and 980 feet across at its widest point. And the entire tomb area is 2,756 feet long. Enclosed by 3 moats, the mound rises approximately 115 feet above the surrounding terrain. The inner moat is the widest of the moats at approximately 200 feet. Today, the tomb is off limits and protected. The mound itself is completely overgrown by vegetation and has been maintained as a sanctuary for fish and water birds. '20th century architecture of Frank Lloyd Wright. 8 buildings in the United States that architect Frank Lloyd Wright designed during the first half of the 20th century have been declared World Heritage Sites. I have them numbered, as you can see. Number 1 is the Unity Temple, built in 1909 in Oak Park, Illinois. Number 2, Frederick C. Roby House, built in 1910 in Chicago. Number 3, Taliesin, built in 1911 in Spring Green, Wisconsin. Number 4, Hollyhock House, built in 1919 in the East Hollywood neighborhood of Los Angeles. Number 5, the Herbert and Catherine Jacobs House, built in 1917 in Madison, Wisconsin. Number 6, Taliesin West, built in 1938 in Scottsdale, Arizona. The one that I love. Number 7, Falling Water House, built in 1939 in Mill Run, Pennsylvania. It's an awesome place. And finally, number 8, the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum, built in 1959 in New York City. All the buildings reflect the organic architecture developed by Wright, which includes an open plan, a blurring of the boundaries between exterior and interior, and the unprecedented use of materials such as steel and concrete. Each of these buildings offers innovative solutions to the needs for housing, worship, work, or leisure. Wright's work from this period had a strong impact on the development of modern architecture around the world. Frank Lloyd Wright was born in 1867 and was raised in rural Wisconsin, studied civil engineering at the University of Wisconsin. He then apprenticed with noted architects in the Chicago School of Architecture, including Louis Sullivan. Wright opened his own successful Chicago practice in 1893 and developed an influential home and studio in Oak Park, Illinois. In the 20th century, he became one of the most renowned architects in the world. He passed away in 1959 and is buried in Phoenix, Arizona. Heritage Sites in 2019. If you're interested in the World Heritage Program and information on the other sites, please go to their website. Now I would like to talk about 7 discoveries of significance that were announced in 2019. Some of these discoveries have been in the process for years, but were only revealed to the public this year. Dig Hill 80. The village of White Sheet in Belgium, an empty field, was set to have 29 houses built on it. But first they were required to call in archaeologists to make sure that it was okay to build here, because this area was the site of a major battle, Messines Ridge, during World War I. The area had changed hands 4 times between 1914 and 1918. In 2015, during the test trenching, a team of archaeologists discovered a well-preserved German strongpoint on the ridge. After the preliminary study, it was determined that the site could contain human remains, so the construction was delayed. The village of White Sheet had been captured by the Germans at the end of 1914, who went on to build what became a formidable fortress that would only be breached in 1917 during the Battle of Messines. In 2017, Belgian archaeologist Simon Verdigen, along with British professor Peter Doyle and German historian Robin Schaefer, succeeded through crowdfunding in raising the required budget for a proper archaeological dig at the site. The Kickstarter program had a goal of raising 140,000 euros, but that was blown away with a total of 179,000 raised. After several very encouraging test digs, the full excavation commenced on April of 2018. The team expected to find remains of a pre-war mill, the German strongholds, as well as human remains of at least 3 soldiers. From the start in April till the final shovel in July of 2018, over 3,000 volunteers helped by donating both time and money to the dig. The first step was to do a desk study where maps, photos, and documentation was compiled and overlaid to form a complete description of the site during the war. The results were very promising. The next step was to ground truth this data in the field. This included the first test trenches. What was actually uncovered during the test trenching was astonishing. Almost all the mapped trenches and buildings indicated in the desk study were located, and significantly, they appeared to be in the exceptional good condition. The wartime trenches were very deep and therefore well preserved. Even more important was the fact that the southern half of the field had never been plowed since the end of the war, ensuring that all the features below surface were untouched. In between the unexpected trenches identified by the desk study, there were more as yet unknown trenches. Some of these trenches were undoubtedly part of the German stronghold, but others could have been related to the early fighting in 1914. One trench line was so rudimentary and contained French rifle ammunition. The team quickly realized how dangerous the site was, brought in a bomb disposal team for the duration because they were finding 10 to 20 pieces of unexploded ordnance a day, from hand grenades to high explosive artillery shells. Luckily, nothing exploded. The quantity and the excellence of the condition of the structures of the trench warfare has made results of the test trenching so significant. Perhaps most importantly, and very poignant, was the discovery of several fallen soldiers within the boundaries of the research area. A total of 3 mass graves were found, containing 128 soldiers, all who have been reburied with honors in the nearby military cemeteries. All these men have been missing for over 100 years. There are estimates that over 120,000 soldiers are still missing and buried in unmarked graves in the fields of Belgium and France. Jerry, you're up. Here is a short BBC video that explains more about this fantastic dig.
Now, when routine checks were carried out on a piece of land which was earmarked for development to become a new housing estate in Belgium, a chilling discovery was made.
It emerged that the site was on a former World War I battlefield. Now, a team of archaeologists and volunteers then discovered the remains of more than 120 soldiers. Graham Satchell has been given exclusive access to this site.
The sun glides across a Flanders field. Underneath the stillness, the beauty, a destructive past is slowly being revealed. This is Dig Hill 80, just a few miles from Ypres in the Belgian town of Waitscharter. It was a fortified command post that changed hands 5 times in the First World War.
The uniqueness of this site is that we have the entire war on this one location, so we can tell a story from 1914 onwards until 1918.
I found this metal thing and I picked it up. And I thought, oh wow, it's a hand grenade. And I put it back down very quickly.
Egbert is one of hundreds of volunteers from more than 40 countries who've given time and money to make this dig possible.
It's the third time today, but yeah.
You have found 3 hand grenades today?
Yeah, today. This is a good spot for hand grenades somehow.
As cellars and trenches have been excavated, more and more finds are revealed. This is a toothbrush. You can just about see the words, British make.
In the last 3 months, the volunteers here have found more than 3,000 artefacts. Some are in incredible condition, like this. It's a British Army water bottle. You can see the blue paint. The condition is incredible. What is it?
A box full of Mills hand grenades.
Box full of hand grenades?
Yeah.
Okay.
Gernot, the explosive expert, is called to make sure everything is safe.
So I can't see if there's a safety pin inside. You take 30 meters, please.
30 meters?
30 meters, yeah.
Okay.
We move away. After a quick inspection, Gernot is happy and work can continue. On the other side of the site, the brutal horror of what happened here. Ben is delicately revealing a human body.
We've got the remains of what we think is a British soldier. It is painstaking work, lifting and excavating them. You tend to put the emotions to one side a little bit while you focus on the job in hand.
This is a small site, less than a hectare. Simon and his team expected to find around 30 dead soldiers. So far, they have uncovered 128. Carla de Roest is excavating a mass grave.
The fact that you will be giving these people a dignified place to rest is very satisfying, very rewarding, I think.
Yeah. It's worth doing.
It's worth doing, yes, it is.
I'm used to find soldiers. It will get to me every time, but this amount is it brings you to the reality of war.
In a few weeks, this site will be flattened. 29 new houses are due to be built. The dead soldiers found here will be given full funerals. Many will be buried in war grave cemeteries in Flanders fields. Graham Satchell, BBC News.
Now, Al Murray is the patron of Hill 80, which is the charity that funded the dig. You would have seen it on some of the guys' hats there. It's with us now. Morning. You know, we just interrupted you because you were there last week, weren't you? And you were just talking about the defensive position, the views you could see.
Yeah, that last image, it must be a drone shot, shows the buildings that made up this defensive position at the top of the hillside, with a hill sloping in front of it. And so the French and the British and then eventually the Americans, to try and take that hill, had to come up the hill. And I mean, the village folklore is that there's an army buried on that hill, and it's pretty much evidently true.
How emotional was it being there?
It was. The thing is I have a keen interest in history, and you can read about the First World War and know the stories of the mud and the blood, and you can go to the Menin Gate and see the names and the cemeteries. But to go to the site and the thing is, they found on the White Sheet site, they found 3 mass graves where there's people just chucked in, thrown in the heat of battle, and it's really harrowing. I mean, it was a very, very strange day when I went on Tuesday, trying to take it all in, to be honest.
It's got to you, this, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah,
I was watching you as you saw the pictures.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Because I mean, there's so many excellent things about this project. It's crowd-funded. People from all over the world have come to work on it, and you know, you've a scene of international conflict where people from lots of nations died. But now, 100 years later, people from all over the world working together to uncover the truth. It's like they're peeling this archaeological onion. It's incredible.
Graham was saying at the end of that piece that the houses will still be built, and that will be a housing estate.
Yeah.
I don't know, that doesn't sit very easy now we know what's underneath.
Yes, but the whole of that part of the world, especially that ridge, is basically a great big graveyard like that. I mean, this is the wonderful thing about this project is the people who died there will be laid to rest. I mean, it was extraordinary. The way they've dug the site is they have a digger and he scrapes 4 inches of earth off, and then they see a darkened patch of earth, which would be where shells landed and exploded and compacted the ground, and then these lighter strips of earth, which are where trenches have been filled back in, and the whole site's mapped out for you, the scene of a battle, and what happened in the First World War. I mean, it's quite a staggering place.
Amazing how projects like this bring so many a diverse amount of people together. Because I know one of the volunteers was an American who'd never actually been to Europe.
Yes, it was his first trip to Europe to work on the site, and the day before I arrived, he'd been working on the site with a Russian, digging up these lads from Bavaria, basically, which is mainly the units that were found fighting on that hill. I mean, and Germans and Dutch people and Belgian people from all over the world. I mean, it's been quite brilliant for that, to be honest.
What struck me reading about this was it's what they found. I mean, human remains, and then sort of military hardware, and then just those little items like a teddy bear, and a bottle, which just humanise it, just make it all the more heartbreaking.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I mean, it's easy to think of soldiers as people in uniforms and khaki with their kit, but you get into, I mean, because these people lived there as well as died there.
And a lot of them were very young.
And they're very young. We probably as young as 15, some of them. I mean, this is the thing. But from all, you get a glimpse into their lives and what trench life was like. I mean, one of the interesting things is there's one of the trenches they've uncovered. At one point, the British did capture the strong point on the hill. So they reversed the trench that would point the other way at the Germans, and then they were kicked out by the Germans. And that's the trench that's been full of stuff, because they left in such a hurry. They dumped the things they didn't think they needed, and that's been a real treasure trove. I mean, it's quite an extraordinary place.
And you use the word treasure trove. You studied history at university, and it's sites like this that keep that, build our knowledge. How's the discoveries on this site going to be used?
Well, the interesting thing about this site is we had plans of what the position probably was. Because it was an old mill, a steam mill on top of a hill. The Germans took it over and then fortified it. And we had their plans. So what we've been able to do is dig it and see if the plans are consistent and actually have a look. Because the German fortifications were a thing they specialised in, a thing they were supposedly much better at than their opponents. So we've been able to find that out. But really, it's a way of having a proper look at a snapshot of what life was like on the Western Front.
It's a vast.
Moving on. Go ahead and advance.
Do I have to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. Whoops.
There we go. Now, wasn't that cool? And if you haven't seen the movie 1917, it really brings that home. Okay. Nebatean Sites Survey, Saudi Arabia. An international team of more than 60 researchers, led by American archaeologist Rebecca Foote, has begun a 2-year in-depth survey of some 11,500 Nebatean sites in an area covering about 1,000 square miles, roughly the size of Belgium. in northwestern Saudi Arabia. The Nabatean civilization inhabited this area and the southern Levant, starting from around 400 BCE and persisted until 160 CE. While the Nabateans ruled their empire from the shining city of Petra in Jordan, they made Hegra, the modern Madian Salah, their second capital. They are known for a sophisticated architectural tradition, which was influenced by the Mesopotamians and the Greeks. They carved the fronts of temples and tombs out of rock cliffs. Unfortunately, they did not leave behind many written documents. No substantial texts or literature have been found. Their status as an independent nation came to an end with the conquest of Nebatea by the Roman Emperor Trajan. Hegra is an archaeological site today, located in Saudi Arabia. A majority of the remains date from the Nabatean kingdom. The site constitutes the kingdom's southernmost and largest settlement after Petra. In 2008, UNESCO added Madian Salah to the World Heritage List, becoming Saudi Arabia's first. It was chosen for its well-preserved remains from late antiquity, especially the 131 rock-cut monument tombs with their elaborately ornamented facades of the Nabatean kingdom. Jamie Quartermain of Oxford Archaeology said that the thousands of high-resolution photographs taken during the aerial surveys of the region and assembled with specialty software will allow the team members to map funerary architecture, standing stones, and rock art sites. The team members will also examine how the Nabateans managed water and agriculture. Flying at between 2,000 and 3,000 feet, the integrated survey group has already covered half of the anticipated 11,500 sites. They are using several different methods of photography, including drones, cameras suspended below the body of light aircraft, and cutting-edge aerial ornithophotography. There will be much more about this in the years to come as they map out this area. That is it's just amazing stuff. We're so familiar with Petra, yet here's another city where they did the same thing. It's amazing. A DNA study of the highlights of the Harappan civilization, India and Pakistan. According to a report in Life Science, Vagish Narasimham of Harvard Medical School and his colleagues were able to obtain a viable DNA sample from the remains of one of 61 individuals buried some 5,000 years ago in a cemetery in India's Rakhamari agricultural site about 93 miles northwest of modern Delhi. Because the region's heat and humidity cause genetic material to degrade rapidly, this is the first time that scientists have been successful in extracting genetic material from a member of the ancient Harappan civilization of the Indus Valley. This civilization covered parts of what are now Afghanistan, Pakistan, and northwestern India. Analysis of the genome suggests that the ancient inhabitants of the Indus Valley are linked to modern South Asians. In a related study of more than 500 people who lived in South and Central Asia over the past 8,000 years, researchers identified 11 individuals unearthed at archaeological sites outside of the Indus Valley in Iran and Turkmenistan, with genetic data closely linked to the Indus Valley individual. It had been noted that their burials were unusual for their locations and suggested that they may have been migrants who left the Indus Valley.
The ancient city of Mohenjo-Daro is one of the first urban centers in human history. Nestled in southern Pakistan's Indus River Valley, Mohenjo-Daro is the largest and best preserved city of the Indus civilization, the earliest known civilization of the Indian subcontinent. Mohenjo-Daro was built around 2500 BC, about the same time the Great Pyramids were being built in Egypt, and it spanned a surface area of nearly 500 acres, an incredible size for a city of this time period. Because of Mohenjo-Daro's grand scale, archaeologists believe it may have served as a seat of power for the Indus civilization. The city was divided into two districts, the citadel and the lower town. The citadel is home to the city's exceptional monuments, including the Great Bath, a 900 square foot tank fed from the Indus River. Mohenjo-Daro also had a sophisticated water system. Houses had baths and toilets, and the town featured both an elaborate sewage system and fresh water in 700 wells throughout the city. The Roman baths, some of history's most famous waterway systems, weren't constructed until many hundreds of years after Mohenjo-Daro's Great Bath. Mohenjo-Daro has no places of worship or governance, such as palaces, royal tombs, or temples. This may indicate that the society was not built around state interests like the Egyptian and Mesopotamian societies at the time. Rather, the class structure of Mohenjo-Daro may have been relatively equal. The city's second district, the lower town, may demonstrate the society's egalitarian structure. The lower town, with its intricate water system, was home to between 20,000 to 40,000 people. Unlike many urban areas of its time, it was laid out in a grid system similar to modern-day city blocks. After approximately 600 years, the city collapsed. No one is quite sure why, but the cause could potentially have been a change within the culture, or in the path of the river. Without its crucial source of water, the city's residents may have moved away, leaving Mohenjo-Daro nearly abandoned. In 1911, nearly 4,000 years after the city fell into ruin, archaeologists paid their first visit. The ensuing decades of excavations have unearthed countless clues that tell the tale of Mohenjo-Daro, but it still holds secrets for us to discover.
Pretty neat. Returned artifacts. Each year I try to let you know what's going on with all the stuff that's been stolen. More stolen artifacts have been recovered and returned to their home countries. First, as part of an agreement between Finland and the United States, the National Museum of Finland has agreed to return the ancestral remains of Native American tribes that once called the cliffs of Mesa Verde National Park home. The agreement involves the remains of about 20 people and 28 funerary objects taken from the Mesa Verde area more than 100 years ago. The remains and artifacts were unearthed during excavations by a Swedish researcher, Gustav Nordenskjöld, in 1891. And hundreds of the items eventually became part of the collection of the National Museum of Finland. Nordenskjöld was arrested when he tried to export the collection. As was a common practice at the time, he packed hundreds of artifacts to be shipped back home to Sweden. He carted off mummified remains, bowls, ladles, baskets, pots, mugs, corn cobs, woven sandals, you get the idea. But getting all these items and remains back to Sweden wasn't easily done. He was arrested for the theft, and it took a month before the court ruled he hadn't broken any law and could take the artifacts. His actions and others played an important part in the creating and signing of the 1906 Antiquities Act by President Teddy Roosevelt. This law protects cultural resources. Roosevelt also established the Mesa Verde National Park in June 29th of 1906. The Swede never lived to see passage of the Antiquities Act, nor creation of the national park. His health deteriorated and he died on June 6th of 1895, just 27 years old. The second group of artifacts to be returned are from the British Museum. They were looted from Iraq and Afghanistan during the recent conflicts. Among the objects due to be returned are a series of Buddhist sculptures, which had been taken illegally from Afghanistan and intercepted at Heathrow Airport on September of 2002. A group of 9 heads sculptured in clay, featuring portrayals of the Buddha, turban heads, a bald head of a monk, and 3 larger heads. The artifacts, dating between the 4th and 6th centuries, will be returned to the National Museum of Afghanistan after they go on temporary display in London with the permission of the Afghan Museum. Among the items to be returned to Iraq are a collection of tablets bearing cuneiform, one of the earliest systems of writing. A haul of 154 Mesopotamian texts written on clay in cuneiform script are seized on entry to the UK in February of 2011. Most date to the period between 2100 and 1800 BCE and belong to the Ur III and Old Babylonian dynasties. They will be returned to the Iraq Museum. Iraqi and world cultural officials have been struggling to retrieve such treasures. About 15,000 pieces are still missing from the museum that reopened this year. More than 5,000 pieces have been returned since 2003. The British Museum has also developed a collaborative project with antiquities authorities, collectors, dealers, and law enforcement agencies called Circulating Artifacts, which aims to identify and return objects to Egypt and Sudan. Over the past year, almost 700 illicit artifacts looted from Egypt and Sudan have been identified and returned. Excavations on the islet of Dashako off Kiros, 125 miles southeast of Athens, have uncovered the most ancient complex of monumental buildings ever to be found in the Greek world. The site dates back almost 4,600 years and perhaps forms part of the inspiration of a key aspect of Greek religion, the belief that mountaintops were the dwelling places of the gods. The building complex uncovered on the islet was once joined to the Cycladic island of Kiros by a narrow strip of land. Though archaeologists have been researching the site for 4 years, it's only in the last 12 months that it was realized the true scale of the complex and the huge effort that had gone into its construction. From around 2550 to 2400 BCE, work was started to refashion the rocky outcrop into a settlement with a building supported on marble terraces. Archaeologists today believe that for the building of the complex, the Bronze Age Greeks made at least 3,500 maritime trips to transport between 7,000 and 10,000 tons of shiny white marble from the quarries on Naxos, which is a larger island about 6.5 miles away. Each return trip would require a crew of 24 to row for at least 5 hours, one way. The voyages, in total around 45,000 miles, allowed the architects to build what is believed to have been a huge religious sanctuary made up of more than 60 marble buildings, specifically made to gleam in the sun. This remarkable effort of ingenuity and discipline didn't end there, however, as the ancient architects had to ensure Dashkalayo, I ruined that name, was suitable enough an island to contain these structures. Hence, the Greeks terraformed the island's mini mountain to create around 3,300 feet of artificial terracing. This additional space was arranged into 6 steps, which were layered down the islet's precipice slopes. Experts believe that the 20-foot wide terraces were designed specifically to house these buildings. While the summit remained open and clear, experts currently estimate that their entire project was completed in a remarkably short time, between 20 and 40 years. The shining white marble used to construct this complex would have allowed the structures to glisten brightly in the sun, resulting in a mesmerizing sight for anyone within viewing distance. Metalworking seems to have been a feature of everyday life. Molds have been excavated from the workshop along with over 100 fragments of baking pans, 14 blowpipe fragments, and quantities of spilled copper. As it stands, experts are inspecting 1,500 stone discs, 700 white pebbles thought to have been used as religious offerings, 36 marble statues, mass-produced weaponry such as daggers and spearheads, and 1,000 religious marble figurines. The island cannot sustain crops or animal life, so all foodstuffs had to be imported from the mainland. Both the Chaco and its neighbor Kiros are strictly closed to visitors. Sherry, you're up. Here is a short video that describes the site. Source of water were the cisterns that they had. I don't know if anybody's been to this place. This sounds interesting. Pre-Clovis Meadowcraft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania. And now for something completely different. Meadowcraft Rock Shelter is an archaeological site located 27 miles west-southwest of the Pittsburgh metropolitan area. The site is a rock shelter in a bluff overlooking Cross Creek, a tributary of the Ohio River, and contains evidence that the area may have been continually inhabited for more than 19,000 years. The site is the earliest known evidence of human presence and the longest sequence of continuous human occupation in the New World. Beginning in the 1970s, excavations under the direction of Mercyhurst University archaeologist Jim Adavasio have yielded evidence that people first camped at the site some 19,000 years ago. He has started a new investigation, which will look for the human DNA in sediments from the oldest area of the site, and will evaluate potential remaining environmental DNA to determine how long organisms have been in the area. If there is our environmental DNA left, we will see what information it gives us about the past and the occupation sequence of this site, added archaeologist Devlin Gandy of the University of Cambridge. The site holds the distinction of being the longest occupied site in Americas. People began camping there from as early as 19,000 years ago and continued visiting the shelter until the 13th century CE. Adavasio turns it a late Pleistocene Holiday Inn, adding, it was never flooded, it's high and dry, the overhang prehistorically was fairly large, and it's well ventilated. Several feet below the shelter's opening is Cross Creek, where campers easily have access to fresh water. The roof collapsed 13,000 to 14,000 years ago, trapping beneath it a wealth of material uncovered in excavations. The site also has yielded many tools: pottery, bifaces, bifacial fragments, laminar blades, a lacellate projectile point, and chipping debris. Recoveries of note have also included fluted points, which are a marker of the Paleo-Indian period. Remains of flint from Ohio, jasper from eastern Pennsylvania, and marine shells from the Atlantic coast suggest that the people inhabiting the area were mobile and involved in a long-distance trade. At least one basin-shaped hearth was reused over time. We keep pushing that date back. A wee drum. A group of ruined stone buildings hidden in the forest of the Scottish Highlands would have been an ideal site for making illicit whiskey. The old buildings, dating back to the 1700s, were almost forgotten until the government agency Forest and Land Scotland, FLS, planned to harvest trees in the area near Loch Ard, about 20 miles from Glasgow. A local history group told the agency about the ruined buildings, and a digital survey of the site was carried out. Making whiskey from malted barley was a traditional farm activity in the Scottish Highlands, but the government banned small whiskey stills from the late 1700s and imposed heavy taxes designed to make money from the whiskey trade. Many Highlanders responded by making whiskey in illicit stills, set up where the government couldn't find them. Does that sound familiar? The stone buildings hidden in the forest above Loch Ard were not completely unknown. A map in 1860 shows them as two groups of farm buildings, a few hundred feet from each other. Today, both groups of stone buildings are in ruins within the forest. Their roofs have now fallen in, but the stone walls are well preserved. Ahead of tree harvesting in the area, FLS archaeologist Matt Ritchie directed a detailed 3D survey of the site. Ritchie said he now thinks that the site may have been used in the late 1700s and early 1800s to distill whiskey for sale in Glasgow, a very lucrative trade that was illegal at the time. The 3D laser scans of the buildings were combined with laser scans of the surrounding forest to give an overall picture of the site. Of special interest are the two large brick kilns at the site, one beside each group of farm buildings. They would have been used to dry farmed grains or malt barley for roasting in the whiskey making process. The front of the kiln of the wreck of the creek Wee Broch has collapsed, but its central chamber or bowl is intact, while the central bowl of the kiln at the Big Broch has collapsed, but is in front and the flue are intact. By combining the digital data from the laser scans of the 2 ruined kilns, archaeologists have been able to reconstruct how a complete kiln would have looked. Archaeological excavations of the buildings could uncover positive evidence of their earlier use, either as illicit distillery or as a working farm. But we have no plans to do that, Ritchie said, adding that the ruins are too remote to warrant further investigation. And you thought archaeology was just boring. Well, that's a representation of what happened in archaeology in 2019. I find it fascinating how, with the new tools that are now available, we are changing our understanding of human history. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did investigating it and preparing this presentation for you. Thank you very much.